Our lives in America are telling us that this country needs a civics lesson, an outlet to, in layman's terms, get to what is really happening in our judicial system and our legal society. Whether you're a law enthusiast or just curious about how our system works, the Full Docket is your guide to understanding the laws that impact us all. I'm Alex Almazan, founder, attorney, and managing partner over at Almazan Law. I encourage you all to listen. I encourage you all to provide us with feedback. Welcome to the Full Docket. Hope you enjoy. Okay, man. So welcome to another episode of the Full Docket. If you're here for the first time, subscribe, get out there, watch it. Hopefully we're going to keep putting out some interesting content. So today is a really cool one. It was an easy one. It's a low-hanging fruit one for me because a guy that's been a good friend for a long time and an amazing lawyer. And I'm still of the belief that there's more than one of them running around the state of Florida because the guy is literally everywhere. And then he went and became our Florida bar president. So I give a little bit of an introduction to both our guest who's here in studio. By the way, you're the first in-studio guest. Yeah.
So I get to see the digs.
Yeah, right. You can actually sign on the wall or something. So I've got our Florida bar president, Roland Sanchez-Medina. So Roland is a partner over at SMGQ, Sanchez-Medina, Gonzalez, Quesada, Laje, all of them amazing guys. I've known them for a long time. We've got him as a grad, cum laude, of course, BC law with honors. Then he decided to go become an even more big-time decorated lawyer. He got an LLM in tax at NYU. He's a super lawyer, AV rated, former CABA president. Dude, I can go on and on. When I went on his website to pull his information, Orange Bowl Committee, Board of Governors, I told you I think there's more than one of them. And he has been an attorney here in Miami for a long time. And today I welcome our buddy Roland Sanchez-Medina. And then I've got two other guests who are joining us as well. So we'd have a couple more lawyers. It's funny when people find out our Florida bar president is coming. I was able to get two amazing lawyers. One of them is Alan Pegg, one of my personal best friends for a long time, and a literal super lawyer, a partner in their litigation arbitration employment department at Hogan Lovells, and also a Boston College guy. I don't know why I did end up with two BC guys in here.
That's fascinating. Didn't know that.
It's pretty fascinating.
Lucky day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got Alan out of his beautiful digs downtown. And then my partner, who is a litigation actual badass as well, and he is the managing partner of our Tampa office and the best appellate lawyer I know, Rick Asfar, who's going to join us as well. So Rick, Alan, thanks guys for giving me a little bit of your time during the holidays.
Hey, thanks for including us, Alex. I mean, it's not every day that you get invited on a podcast to have a discussion with not only a bunch of great friends, but also one of whom who happens to be the president of the Florida Bar. So just honored to be included in the group.
That's
Likewise,
awesome,
man. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, buddy, that's it. No more accolades, dude. Thanks for coming.
Okay,
awesome.
well, I do want to say that I'm fortunate to be on here. Thank you very much, Alex. You know, I'm a huge fan of yours, both professionally and personally. I like how you live your life. And I can say the same thing about Alan Pegg as well, too. I don't know Rick as well, and I look forward to meeting him. But you know, they're gentlemen who are, you know, there's a lot of people that are really good in certain aspects of their lives, but you know, few people that are good at all aspects of their life. And I mean, family and their profession. And the two gentlemen that I do know, you and Alan, you got that shit down to a science. And so congratulations.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Alan, how's that for a start here? It's pretty cool. That's awesome, dude. Well, and I take a lot of that from knowing you for a long time. You taught me how to be a good dad and somehow manage practicing law just by watching you. All right, now that we have blown smoke up all of our asses, let's jump in. Buddy, I want to start with you. I think it's really cool, your story. And hopefully we're going to have a bunch of lawyers, especially they're going to watch this. So, you know, you and I are both Cuban Americans, but you're a real one because you were actually born there. I'm a first generation, as I like to say sometimes, American Cuban, because I was born here, but I will never, ever forget. But tell us a little bit about your story, man, before we get into some of the other things.
Yeah, so it's funny. It's a story that I didn't really appreciate until I got a little bit older, until you have your own kids. But I was born in Cuba, and my sister and I were little. We were 2 and 1, and my dad was an orthopedic surgeon in Havana. And my dad just wanted to get off the island. Obviously, Cuba's an island. Not you just can't cross the border somewhere. And obviously didn't want to take the Florida Straits and all the dangers that could possibly bring. And there was an opening in the Belgian Congo for a doctor. My dad said, you know, my dad would have gone anywhere else. He would have gone to hell if it would have.
I was going to say clearly in Congo.
Yeah, and I don't mean to I guess I'm kind of shaming the Belgian Congo, but he would have gone anywhere to be able to get out of Cuba. And so there was a position in the Belgian Congo for a doctor. And my dad said, I'm all over it. And he went. And then the Belgian Congo had several Cuban agents there. So we had to stay there for a couple of years. And then finally, my dad saw an opening and we got political asylum in South Africa. And then from the Belgian Congo, and that was the most difficult part of this endeavor, was getting on a plane in the Belgian Congo and being able to land in South Africa. Because like I said, Cuban agents were everywhere. And my dad, would tell us the story of the anxiety to make sure that, somebody didn't come on the plane and pull us off the plane. And then obviously after that, we were headed right back to Cuba. But we made it successfully. My dad practiced medicine in South Africa. I actually went to school in South Africa. I spoke Afrikaans for a little bit as I was a youngster. Obviously, after we left South Africa, I didn't really use it much, so I don't remember any of the Afrikaans.
Did you get to Miami and didn't find a place where you could use it constantly?
Interestingly enough, not one person. And so we went to Spain after South Africa, but then we came to Philadelphia. My dad was able to get his license to practice medicine at Albert Einstein Medical Center. I spent a lot of formative years in Philly. A lot of my favorite sports teams are still Philly teams. But of course, like all good Cubans, at some point
you got to come back.
You got to come back to the motherland, away from the motherland.
100%. And for everybody like you that comes here, we have a guy like Alan who's from Wisconsin and then married a Cuban.
Yeah,
there's still a Cuban tie that pulled him in.
Yeah, well, he married a beautiful woman, so yeah, Alan's no fool. Como se dice, no tiene nada, right?
No tiene nada, for sure. He knows what that means. He learned Spanish, and unlike you,
that idea.
He keeps doing it. There's that story's, dude, and then you get here, you go to UN, and we know what your practice.
Well, before that, I went to Belen Jesuit Prep.
That's right, but I don't know. We got to do a shout out there. There's a Belen Jesuit connection. I was going to let him throw it out there, but of course, and that's that. We're both big fans of that education. You go through Belen, you end up at UM. Now you're here, and now you're our Florida bar president. And I don't want to skip over all of those years in between, but I think why don't you tell us why now, and why did you decide to become our current Florida bar president?
Well, it was an interesting, because I was about 6 or 7 years into my service in the Board of Governors, and frankly, it was time to either make the decision to try to become president or let somebody younger come on. And the Board of Governors is an interesting place because it's always like a U. And so I was just sitting there, and I looked around the Board of Governors, and I'm not necessarily that cocky or arrogant. And I wish I had more self-confidence. Certainly this role here has helped me with my self-confidence, but I looked around and I said, well, why not me? Right. And I looked around and I started saying, well, I'm just as good, there are some formidable people in the Board of Governors, for sure. Saya Baker Barnes, who's the president-elect, is formidable. Mike Orr, who's the president-elect, designated formidable people. But at the time I was like, why not me? And I was, you establish relationships with people and you work hard. And there's a couple of committees on the Board of Governors that are, if you become chair of those committees, then, you're sort of in a good track for leadership. I was able to chair those, and you work hard. The Board of Governors, it's a fun organization. You meet some extraordinary people from across the state, but it's got to be fun, right? Or otherwise it's just work.
Right. It's just work when you're not at work. Right. So you got to add a fun component to it.
And I love it. I mean, I enjoy the people. I meet some extraordinary people from across the state. I mean, Rick is from Tampa. There's extraordinary members of the Board of Governors from Tampa, including an ex-president, Bill Schifino, his brother, John Schifino. And so I just looked around and I said, man, why not me?
Yeah.
And because I had built some relationships over the years, fortunately, I got their support. And so, getting the support from the local Board of Governors means the world to me, because they're telling their people, okay, this is the guy to vote for. And then it's obviously the best kind of race, an unopposed race.
That is a good one. That is a good one. When I saw you run unopposed, I was like, well, this is going to be simple for him to get elected, and then hard once you get in.
Yeah. The work really starts, obviously, but it's been fabulous, man. I love being president of the Florida Bar. First of all, it's an incredible honor and a distinction representing lawyers. I mean, I'm a working lawyer. I mean, I know everything we go through, from working at a big firm, working at a small firm, working at a medium-sized firm, bringing in the work, doing the work, still trying to get more work, because you're busy now doesn't mean you're going to be busy 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. So it's a constant work, grinding, you got to be gritty in this profession, like you have with your firm, Alex. And so it may sound silly, it may sound hokey, but I love representing the lawyers in the state of Florida.
There's nothing hokey about that. And I love that you just said that, because I know those two lawyers on the screen really well. And both of them fit the mold of that gritty, always working, and right, guys, I don't want to talk for you, but I think it's a good segue from what you just said, because you and I have had these conversations over the years about that reality of, dude, you're 20 years into your practice, you're working your ass off, you're doing everything you just said. It's like you said, a client here today, they get mad tomorrow because, you're 6 months into a litigation, they paid $100,000, the case isn't moving. They leave, you get somebody else. You're constantly trying to generate work. You're trying to do the best, highest level work for lawyers like you, definitely these two that are on there. So it's a good segue, I think, into this kind of mental health aspect, right? Because, and Alan, let's start with you, maybe from a large firm, Hogan Lovells, right? One of the largest law firms on the planet. And Alan, a partner there.
Great law firm.
Yeah, such a great law firm, right? And I'm sure, like, Rich Lorenzo for a long time there. He's a good dude as well. Alan, maybe talk a little bit about how you guys as a firm, and let's lead a conversation, because for you, Roland, and I pulled this off the internet, okay? I didn't have to ask Roland in advance when I was like, all right, let me see what his bar initiatives are. Like, what did he want as Florida Bar president? And I'm going to tell you, one of the first things that I saw was the mental health as an issue that you wanted to have addressed for the Florida Bar. And I'll be the first one to raise my hand. Dude, I have been in some dark places over those 25 years when you get into some spots. Maybe I remember, for me personally, I went through a solid year and a half. That it was like, this is a lot. It was about 10 years ago. This is a lot, man. Like, what am I doing here? What's going on? Alan, maybe a little bit from your perspective and how you guys as a big firm are addressing, all those demands, right? You guys, we all have them. And maybe how you or your firm look at mental health.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it, Alex. And I'm really glad, and I'm thankful to Roland for making this one of his priorities, because I think it should be. I think it's certainly worthy of being a top priority to the profession. I've been practicing about 24 years. These mental health issues, have gone back decades and decades and decades before that. And I think that, one of the, I guess, silver linings of COVID, if that's the right way to put it, but I think that the pressures that sort of came to the forefront overtly during COVID really made everybody pay attention to specifically and focus on the mental health issues. And our firm, had that on our priority list beforehand, but it sort of started to jump the line in terms of priorities. And we are very sort of cognizant of, from a management perspective, from a partnership perspective, from a team perspective of people's mental health and the priorities, to dealing with it, not just sweeping it under the rug. And so we offer, a number of different programs and seminars and things like that to our team members certainly around the world, certainly around the U.S., but moreover around the world, to help people work through when they need to, because it's inevitable. I don't think there's any lawyer who's going to be honest with himself or herself, and you, who would come on this podcast and say, you know what, everything has always been absolutely A-okay for me mentally in this profession, with the blend of our professional and personal lives that this job entails, right? There's really, for somebody who's at the top of their game, as all of you are, there's not much separation. You're always working, no matter if you're with your daughters or your sons or your family or on vacation or otherwise. So that mental pressure is always there. So that's
and if I can add something, and it doesn't matter whether you work at one of the most prestigious, largest firms in the world, in Hogan Lovells. And by the way, the practice area group that Alan works for is among the best literally in the world. Whether you're at a big firm, whether you're a solo practitioner, or at a small firm, the pressures are a little bit different, but the pressures are still there.
They're the same, right? They're the same. And that's why, on top of the fact that he's such a dear friend of mine, because of that, I definitely wanted to that big firm perspective too. The pressures, they're just different sizes and different smells and different shapes, but it's the same weight, I think, at the end of the day. And Rick, I'm going to give you a chance on here too. But when we talk about how is the Florida Bar, what is the picture during what remains of your term, and then creating something that goes beyond that, because it's always going to be there, right? I think a wise lawyer once told me, is like, anybody who thinks that this profession is 9 to 5, you should get out now.
Yeah, the quicker the better.
Right. Let's just teach you early on. Right. This is not how it works. And I've told that to all the young lawyers I've run into, you that are such a great mentor now and in this leadership role. There is a reality, right? The best lawyers, got to work on a Saturday or Sunday. I was in Spain 2 weeks ago, and my sister literally had to hold my hand because she was afraid I was going to run into oncoming traffic because I'm on my phone 5 hours ahead, and she's just guiding me so I'm still on my phone connected. So we can all share stories like that. But what about you and the bar itself? How do you see how we're going to deal with that impact for both our generation, those older, and just all the lawyers? 11,000, I think it is now, and 97,
almost 114,000.
yeah, and when you take out some that are inactive, it's almost 100,000 practicing lawyers that you're responsible for, and we all have issues.
No, I mean, listen, we all have issues, and the one thing is, I talk about it. I mean, listen, someone like you and someone like Alan, and I imagine Rick as well too, someone will look at each of you and say, well, you guys don't look stressed out. You guys are managing this pretty well. I mean, you look fantastic.
I'm going to conference you in the next time Rick calls me at like 10:30 at night on a Tuesday. I'm like, hold on, buddy, let's get rolling on here.
Yeah. I'm saying, I mean, the appearance, like you got your shit together, right? I mean, we all try to, and it's something we try to maintain. But inside, we're like, shoot, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I include that in the contract? Oh my God, I get my bills out. The client's asking for a discount. I worked my butt off on this thing. And so it's all this just complete onslaught of issues. And at the same time, we're trying to look like Superman, right? I mean, you need to look to your client like you are. I'm the lion in the room. I'm not only am I lion, but I'm the smartest lion in the room and the best dressed lion, et cetera, right? And the truth of the matter is inside, it's chaos. It's chaos. And we're trying to keep so many balls in the air. It's kind of miraculous that a few more balls don't just slip through our hands.
It's totally. It's like when we're talking today, we're going to talk about the rule changes that are coming in January. And I love my partner Rick when he shared with Alan and I would give you a copy. He shared with us like a 14-page summary. And hearing you talk about all the chaos, literally the title of it up top says, we shared with all the lawyers, how to prevent malpractice.
Yeah.
And that's literally the title of it. And when that's always was my stress, right? And how many young lawyers or lawyers you hear that are going out on their own, and one of their first questions is, how much is malpractice insurance? I'm like, it's really not that expensive as long as you don't commit it. But amongst all the chaos, amongst all the stuff that we have going on, what kind of resources or how are you looking at it from the Florida bar, right? So Alan talks about it, they'll have, I'm sure, all sorts of tools and opportunities. But how do you in the Florida bar see how we're spread? Because whether you're a solo practitioner or you're at a firm like Hogan or mine or yours, what are the resources or how do you think it's going to impact to help take care of that problem?
I mean, one of the things I like to talk about it because I want everybody to know, like even the president of the Florida bar, who's been fortunate, been blessed. Like I said, I live 5 minutes from my office. I have great partners. I got a great practice, but I'm stressed from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to bed. So one of the things is I try to talk about it and normalize it because this is just a reality. And it's like trying to change the Titanic from hitting the iceberg. It's the practice of law is what it is. I mean, don't even ask Alan what he charges on an hourly basis.
I know,
somebody will have a heart attack right now.
Right, I know.
And so,
by the way, just so you know, it's
I received that's important. Two different things.
That's right. Yeah, that is important.
And so I try to talk about it a lot because I want to normalize it. It shouldn't be a stigma. And so, once we get beyond that, Florida Bar will let you. We'll give you someone to call, a 1-800 number, and of course I forgot to bring that number with me, which I regret. But you have four free counseling sessions to
Look
talk
it
to.
up, while he's talking.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
So you can have 4 free counseling sessions with someone to talk about the anxiety that this is causing. And listen, I mean, frankly, we lawyers, and I'm not exempt from this either. We treat alcohol as the medicine. And we're a hardworking, hard partying kind of group, and talking about it, alcohol can't be the only. No, there was also when I've been there. There's also been cigarettes involved too, like that booze and cigarette when you're having and worse.
Time.
I mean, listen, I don't, we don't.
But yeah, right. But that's one of the ways we do it. Alcohol is an issue. Mental health is an issue. From a tool standpoint, like what are we looking at and how we educate both those that are suffering from it and those that are going to face it?
Well, like I said, I think the counseling sessions are fantastic. I also want to talk about it so that people normalize it. But I encourage people to get involved with their voluntary bars because I think talking about it with your colleagues, whether at the Cuban American Bar Association or the Wilkie Ferguson Bar Association, we talk about the stresses so that we at least can empathize with each other and discuss it to normalize it because it's like you said, if you're a young attorney and you don't want to deal with stress, you better find another profession, brother.
Man.
Find another profession, because it's just, I was talking to the Lee County Bar Association, and the chief judge there said that lawyers are 3.5 times more likely than non-lawyers to commit suicide, right? And the numbers on the alcoholism rates by the ABA, by the Betty Ford Clinic, are astonishing. It just, and like I said, it's the contrast between having these issues and trying to be the Superman to your client, that you're you will kick the door down.
For them
if you need it, and
even if you're hungover. Right. And that reality from you, I think that is one of the best ways to do it, is to normalize the conversation, is to have the Florida bar president say, I've been there. I'm there. And I remember years ago, and guys, this is good for you. And Rick, I want you to chime in. I remember years ago talking to Roland back in the day when he was just Roland and not our president. And we were both in a spot around the same time. We were like, dude, if we lose our associate tomorrow, I remember we had this conversation one day. We were both like, we're both screwed.
Yeah. I think that wasn't the word, but it's similar to that.
Yeah, I was going to say something else, but I don't want to get canceled.
Right.
But even this was, well-to-do. We were both double digits out. We were both holding ourselves out to the local community as superstars, and everything that we were doing and whatever at a time. We were both associate tomorrow saying, I'm out for whatever reason, would have sent us into a tailspin, because we were so reliant on that aspect to it, to then have to go find someone. So there's so many different ways. Normalizing the conversation, Roland, I think is such a brilliant way to go about it. Rick, I know you've got 2 cents on here, because we talk about anxiety. Rick and I go through this all the time. We try to walk each other off a ledge. He's got an appellate practice, and he's got twin boys that are 6. He made the mistake of marrying a lawyer too. So can you imagine?
I
was about to say. So you found some commonality. Roland did the same thing. I can't even imagine what that's like, to go home to a lawyer. On top of that, it's like 2 combustible sources. But Rick, this is an issue I know that's near and dear to both of us too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one, I'm going to try to normalize the phone number myself. I've called it. It's a great phone number. The folks who are on the other end of that line with the Florida Bar, with the mental health, phenomenal. Highly recommend it. If you need it, do it. And even if you don't think you need it, do it anyway, because our profession is very unique. That when you're a litigator, you're the only.
By the way, thank you very much, man. That's courageous of you to even say that, man. I'm very impressed, Rick. Very impressed.
Of course, man. Of course. Thank you. I feel like we're among friends, and I think it's important. And I'm really glad I did it. And if one person hears this and does it, I think it's absolutely. Our profession is unique. When you go to the doctor, there isn't another doctor in the room who's undoing the work that doctor number 1 did to take care of you. Same thing if you're going to college, if you're a professor, there isn't some other professor trying to unteach what you did. Us as litigators, appellate advocates, there is somebody else on the other side of a case, usually who's smarter than me if it's one of my cases, who's trying to undo the work that I've just done. And that's stressful as all get out. It's the first thing I think of when I wake up, the last thing I think of when I go to bed, along with trying to juggle, my nanny is out today. She called out sick yesterday. She called out sick Friday. How do you juggle these things, especially if you get a file the day before that's already in default? You got to figure out a way to set that aside while you're juggling your kids. And it is a lot. And I really applaud you. And I really appreciate that this is something that you've made it a part of your platform, because I do think it's very, very important for all of us in the profession to understand it, normalize it, talk about it, and then, figure out as a profession the best way for all of us individually to deal with it.
Yeah. No, but you make a couple of great points, because not many times in life you have somebody across the aisle, and even litigation, clearly, you guys are scorched earth, blank you. But even in the transactional world, which I mostly reside in, you're going at it with each other, right? I mean, whether it's the language or negotiating terms, but you make a great point. I don't think that there's any other profession where it's like that, where you have someone that you're constantly, and it doesn't have to be nasty. The transactional world is not necessarily nasty like litigation can be. But you have someone who's fighting for their own interests and their best interests, and you guys are adverse, and so that's literally every day. And then, of course, the other thing is what you said is people give you their problems on top of your problems. No one could care less. Your twins, who's picking them up, getting them into middle school, whatever the case may be. They just fix my problem.
That's
right?
it.
That's it. And whatever I'm sure you got issues, but I want you to fix my problem first. That's It's an astute point, Rick.
Yeah, it is, man. I appreciate it. Rick, thanks for sharing that. We've all dealt with that. And I love that it's being addressed. And it's definitely an issue in this pressure cooker of a field that we call law. So a good segue, I want to make sure we hit a couple other topics is, and you just mentioned it at the end, which lawyer participation in bar activities. You mentioned it as a segue into how to deal with mental health, because you can get into the room with other like-minded lawyers and have conversations and realize you're not alone. You realize rather quickly, probably over a cocktail, but you realize
typically,
right, but you realize rather quickly that you're not alone. And I appreciate that. But you also, aside from the mental health aspect, is you also really want to encourage lawyer participation in bar activities. How do you find are the best ways to do it and get the youth involved? I talked to you, for example, shout out to Natalia Yiddy, an associate here at my firm, who just became the Colombian Bar Association president as a young lawyer. She decided, and of course you, because you clone yourself, were at her inauguration. And remember that movie Multiplicity? I think we're going to figure out there's like 3 of Roland running around. But that's an example. Young lawyer wanted to get involved, opened her mouth and did some stuff. And now she's the president of a bar association.
She's going to be an amazing president.
And so how, as that example that's just near and dear to me, but how do you both encourage it and from a Florida bar perspective, really engage, especially the younger lawyers, to get involved?
Well, the 11th Circuit is special because we have so many affinity groups. There's not a lot of Colombian American bar associations in the rest of the state of Florida, but there's a Cuba, Colombian American Bar Association, Wilkie Ferguson,
YLD,
Miami-Dade Fall, and so there's just so many. You just have to find the one. Like in my case, I found my home at a Cuban American Bar Association, obviously because I'm Cuban. But there's so many. I don't know if Alan's involved with the federal society, maybe that's what it's called, the federal bar. I'm sorry. What you're going to find is you're going to find other attorneys going through similar things. You have a discussion about it. Oh, and by the way, there's a little business development going on there too, right? And so like, hey, I happen to do work in this area, or I do some immigration work. And so from my perspective, it's a win-win-win because you can talk about some of the issues that you're facing at the same time. And then we don't do it for the business development. Like I said, I did the board of governors, man, because I was, frankly ambitious, but also I enjoyed it, right?
Yep.
I didn't really think about it, what can be at the end of the rainbow. I just thought that the process was just a lot of fun. And I will tell you, if you get involved with organizations like CABA, like Miami-Dade Fall, like the Wilkie Bar Ferguson Bar Association, not only will you have a good time, but it'll bring other improvements in your life. Like I said, the connections, the business development, et cetera.
It's necessary, right?
I do think it is. Otherwise, you're really on an island. I mean, like you're really kind of alienated if you're not talking about the stresses that you think. And that's I think that's the worst possible scenario is when you feel like you're alone out there juggling all these things.
100%. And for you guys, maybe Rick or Alan, let's get one of you to chime in on this because I do think from a lawyer participation. I think even post-COVID now, it's even more important because you have so many lawyers, right? We're not going to get into remote work discussions and how people are being pulled back, but the reality of you being remote in some way, talk about an island. Like at least if you came in to work, you would have people around you all the time. But so many of us now end up in this isolation of doing work remotely, at least in some part, that it's almost your human interaction intake that's required for you to become an even better lawyer. Do you guys, Rick, up in Tampa, for example, how do you see young lawyer participation or find that bar activities up there? Do you find that there are good accesses and resources in the Hillsborough County?
Absolutely. The Hillsborough County Bar Association is wonderful. It's got a bunch of different subsections that folks can get involved in. We have 3 general and several other inns of court here in Tampa. I'm a member of one of them. It's terrific. And I'll tell you that when I first got involved, I came out here in 2009. I started getting involved in the local bar in 10, 11. And I got involved with the diversity committee. And I can draw a straight line between the relationships that I made in 2010, 2011, and my practice today, where I'm an appellate attorney. I'm a lawyer for other lawyers when things get tricky. And the relationships I made there really have fed into what I do today in 2024, almost 25. And we're very fortunate that we have some wonderful bar associations.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, if I could just tell you the names of the board of governors from your circuit, because and they're particularly strong. And I think if you reach out, Amy Ferrier, Carter Anderson, and Paige Greenlee, in addition to John Schifino. And I imagine, have you ever come across Amy Ferrier in your appellate work?
Yeah, I'm actually giving her partner Tom Elliott amicus support at the Florida Supreme Court in the Hughes versus Universal appeal. They're wonderful people. I've known them for years.
Amy's a sweetheart. Amy, unfortunately, is not running for re-election, but they'll get somebody strong in the Tampa area. But it's a small world. I'm glad. I'm not surprised that you're working with them.
That's and that. Thanks for sharing that. Those things, and I think for you as well. I think it's immensely important. And in the limited time that we have, I really wanted to make sure that we hit on those two initiatives for you. One was the mental health, great segue into the fact that we have young lawyers, especially getting involved in activities. And it is absolutely, I think, a requirement for everybody to do. I do want to kick, so we want to always keep these things to, because Roland and I could talk forever. So we want to keep it to at least a listenable length. So one thing that I would love to touch on, and I'm going to cede the floor here to these two that are in the litigation realm much more than I am these days, is those new rules that are going into effect now on January 1st. And I told you about the kind of cheat sheet that Rick shared throughout here on bringing things down. And man, there are some pretty good, right? But there's some stress. Going back to that mental health issue associated with the fact that, for example, every lawyer in litigation is like, shit, motions for continue already getting denied. Kind of in advance of it. Trials are going to be pushed, right? We'll get into the reality of pushing me to be ready for trial to still show up and be 82nd on a trial calendar when there's not more judges. So it's, you can only do so much, and where the practical is going to hit. Roland, I know there's a lot of changes. So maybe talk a little bit about that and the fact that we're going to add, well, hopefully we're going to add, the Supreme Court came down and said like 65 new judges would be the current recommendation. Why don't you touch on that? And then Alan and Rick, why don't you go ahead and pepper him with your own comments and questions after?
Yeah. And a large majority of the 65 are actually allocated for Miami-Dade County. And so, yeah, one of the things that are important to us coming now in January is to support the judicial system in getting this legislative agenda passed. I was on a call last week with Chief Justice Muniz and frankly all the judges that wanted to listen in. But the idea is to educate them on what the legislative agenda is, and it's to get more resources for these reasons. Because I think we all recognize that if we have with these new court rules, the judges need we need more judges. B, they need more assets, more case management assets to be able to properly implement the new rules. It's important for us, and I think, frankly, a lot of the legislator knows. A lot of them, first of all, are lawyers, and they realize how important this is. I just hope we can get it passed, because otherwise, not really giving judges the resources they need to implement these new rules. But it doesn't change the fact that the new rules are here, right?
They're coming, man.
They're coming, right. And so it's a fascinating time. I don't know that I would want to be a local state court with lots and lots of cases, because it does seem daunting, and that's probably the best way I can say it. There's probably worse ways of putting it, but it's daunting. But like I said, we're gonna make sure that we find the money. We can find the money. We're gonna do our best efforts so that the court system actually is fully funded to the extent that it's needed.
Yep. Alan, you want to chime in there?
Yeah, so that's, Roland's comment that the majority of these new judges, assuming they get sort of the funding to do it, are going to land up in Miami-Dade County is manna from heaven for me. Obviously, being a practitioner down here in South Florida, I have tremendous respect for our entire bench, but I certainly know how overworked they are and how difficult of a job it is with their caseloads that they manage, thousands of cases. And in particular, so that's great. But I think Roland is spot on, that the changes to the rules are now bringing us, we always had these complex business divisions in many of the circuits, not all, but in many, Miami-Dade among those. And those rules that applied in those divisions sort of brought you one step closer to being in federal court with the management and the structure that entails. And now I think that the overall, and I think that everybody who's listening to this, who certainly in litigation, but I think overall, we don't have enough time to go through all the rule changes. You need to read it because many of them are very important. But everything is becoming much more structured. But I think Roland's comment is right, which is that's the rules as written. But if the resources aren't given to the judges to put that structure into operation and to hold people's feet to the fire, it remains to be seen. I think the jury's out as to what actual daily impact the rule changes will have on litigation, on the court system. Because it's one thing to tell judges, hey, you got to put a case management order in effect. Can't give continuances without good cause. Multiple continuances of trial settings are extremely disfavored. that's great that the rules say that. Whether or not the judges are going to be able to actually put that into effect remains to be seen.
Yeah. There's Rick, you want to chime in on that too? 'Cause I know some of the changes there are, you want to talk about some mental gymnastics when the rules first came out. Rick and I were on the phone. I don't think he drinks like I do, but I think that night he might have. I think that night he might have.
He might have been
because he was like, Alex, we have so many cases and blah, blah, blah. And I can still replay it in my mind. Like he needed a hug, man. He needed a hug.
And I'll tell you what my thought is. I mean, most litigators, I think, a bellwether of a normal number of cases is, like 50, right? And those need to be adjudicated within 18 to 24 months. Well, you can only get one case per trial docket. So from a mental gymnastics standpoint, it's like, well, how can I have the caseload that I've had forever and still be available, for my trial docket when I can't get continuances anymore? It used to be where it was like, well, I've got a conflict here, Your Honor. I got a conflict there, Your Honor. And the reality is, I mean, one of my buddies who's a judge has told me, he's like, I've got several thousand cases on my docket. I literally only have 15 minutes a year for the average case on my docket. That's it. Just one 15-minute hearing. That's all I got per case. And so there is a lot of things that are going on here where, from the lawyer's standpoint, what do I do with my inventory of cases now? Should I have multiple cases that are set for the same trial docket for the same month? And from the judge's standpoint, it's not like all of a sudden they're going to have more time. I hope they get the clerk type resources that are in federal court, because I think that's why federal court can do what it does. And my understanding is that the state court does not have the clerk system, a one-to-one judge to clerk. In federal, it's actually even more. But I really am curious to see how this is going to work out in practice at the state court level. Will there be more grace the first year? I hope there is for those who haven't quite gotten up to speed yet. But I think it's going to be very interesting.
No, and I suspect, Miami-Dade County is clearly number one, but and maybe Broward after that, but Hillsborough County has got to be next in terms of the number of cases on the docket. So, talk about areas that really need some help.
Yeah, for sure. And then when you get people like me that decided to grow a law firm and open a Tampa office, it's just bringing more litigation into that town. And so in the interest of time, too, I want to make sure we touch on one more topic and then whatever Roland wants to end the exchange with, which is artificial intelligence, right? Hell, from you that it's in transactional to us in litigation, those two guys that are on the screen, to me who's in both, right? Because we have a real estate stuff going on here. We have the litigation, and I'm sure we all do. We can see how it's going to impact, right? So lawyers redeemed of the top 5 professions that are out there that are going to be impacted by AI. And I think we're also in the top 5 on suicide rates. So there's probably a correlation there. But the AI is going to send some people into some challenging times. Because if you're a small firm and you're a solo practitioner, 1, 2, 3, 4 lawyers, where you could probably really use the time savings, right? Because you remember those days like me,
Absolutely.
You're billing, you're all the stuff that we already talked about, and you don't have enough time when you're that. And something north of I think 60% of all lawyers in the state of Florida work at firms that are under 5 lawyers. So you have a lot of those people where AI could be a differentiating technology that allows you to somehow scale up to maybe even compete with Alan and his team at Hogan Lovells, right? When they wheel 6 lawyers into a hearing against you. And but you also have the other side of it, where if you're a big firm or medium-sized firms like we are, there's a lot of ways to use this technology, right? And then you got to change your billing, right? Because now the rules on ethics are very clear. You can't take a 12-hour discovery review, put it through AI, it spits something out, you review that, all the work was done in under an hour and a half as opposed to a 12-hour bill to a client, but you bill the 12 hours to the client. Obviously, you can't do that. So people have to start figuring out alternate pricing models and certain things. But the impact itself, how do you see it? It's coming under your watch, right? You'll be looked at as you came in as a bar president as the AI boom began. Whether you're a large firm like Allen's that say they could afford to do more proprietary stuff, or those like me that are looking at tools and how can you implement certain ways, and talk a little bit about that. Westlaw and Lexis also in the last year and a half both wheeled out their own AI tools, right? LexisNexis has AI Plus. Westlaw came out with, I think it's called Co-Counsel or Counsel, that comes out and does that. Our case management platform that just whipped out an AI component to help the staff be more efficient on prioritizing calendars and things. So how do you see it, and how are you, a Florida bar president, with all the lawyers that you talk to, how are you seeing people's concerns and in this area?
First of all, just to corroborate your numbers, 70% of the bar is at law firms, 10 lawyers or less. 60% are what you said, 5 lawyers or less. Obviously, a great majority of the bar is at small firms, which actually, when that data came out, kind of surprised me a little bit. And if you throw in governmental lawyers, which is another 10%, really it's not even big firms because it's anything 11 above.
Right, everything
it's
11
about 20% of the lawyers in Florida. And so it's here. And we were the first state, I can say proudly, to come up with ethical rules on the usage of AI, because that's the last thing you want to do is start using AI and violate your ethical obligations, which we've done. But for me, though, it wasn't just enough just to regulate attorneys on AI. And I think this week or the following week, and there's a member of the Board of Governors from Miami called Carl Klein, who's spearheaded sort of the subcommittee that is going to sort of, maybe, I wouldn't know if it's a review of products, but safely say how you can use AI in your practice, because whether you like it or not, it's obviously here. And so I frankly, if I, a letter that's more in a paragraph or two, I run it through AI to make it better, right? And every single time it'll make it a little bit better.
Listen, I firmly believe there's 2 types of lawyers that when it comes to AI. Either the lawyers who use AI or the lawyers who don't and are going to be looking for another profession. Like, it's here in some way.
Yeah, no, and everyone's talking about it. I don't know to what extent lawyers are using it just because they're unsure how to use it. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Because shoot, I can just throw out a letter on ChatGPT and it'll improve it. But what we're trying to do is look at what's out there in the marketplace and maybe give some recommendations on, what are the good tools to be using. Because, and frankly, and you guys are younger than I am, but the kids coming out of law school and the 20 and 30-year-olds, they're all over it. I mean, they're going to be using it. So it is a matter of being able to tell lawyers how to safely use AI and give recommendations on the kind of things they should be doing. And as far as I can tell, though, Alex, and I think anyone who's used it, it's all about the prompts, right? I mean, using the prompts.
But that's become a course now. To become a prompt engineer. It's actually become a course to teach you. It's kind of like when I tell young lawyers, right? I'm sure it's like, hey guys, when I was in law school, and you had to do /S/P/10 and do all this stuff, and you moved into just natural language search. It was like, oh, this is so great, right? And now I kind of feel like this is the next generation of that. If you grew up just natural language searching your way through LexisNexis and Westlaw, and now all of a sudden, this is the next step from that, is and now having an interactive conversation.
With guardrails, right? With guardrails on how to use it. Yeah. And I mean, no one wants to be in a position, that famous case of the guy in New York who...
Well, that dude was an idiot. Like, it was 5 cases off the internet, right? At least when you go to AI, you go to LexisNexis or Westlaw, these are closed language models. So I'm sure you agree, the internet, like I tell my kids, not everything on the internet is true.
Yeah, no. And you found out that AI has hallucinations, right? And the hallucinations are these cases that it makes up. I was swearing in some younger attorneys at the 3rd DCA, and Chief Judge Ivan Fernandez talked about, he put in, how to give an easement for your home, and AI gave it this beautiful paragraphs that cited case law, which every single one of them was made up. I love the 3rd DCA judges. Let me look for these cases. And so we just have to be mindful that, trust. Are we ready to trust AI? Maybe through some of the sources that, like a firm like Allen's can afford, right?
Yep.
And so the question is, how the 70% of the lawyers at law firms, 10 lawyers or less, how can they safely use AI? And that's something I think that's a benefit and a service that the Florida Bar should be doing for its members, to make practice a little bit easier, giving recommendations. Everyone is not at a Hogan Lovells where they can, and I'm guessing they could pay $2 million for a Hogan Lovells AI service, right? And so that's exactly the challenge. But it's not lost upon me, and my successor Saya, and then after her Mike Orr, that we need to encourage and teach lawyers how to use AI safely, so that they don't have issues like that.
I wanted to, Alan, maybe you want to chime in there. This is going to be our last topic, and try to keep it in there, but I thought it was so important. And from Roland as the bar president, how is the bar looking at it? And I love the statistic of the 70%, because those are typically the ones that would help more. But then we also don't want the playing field to get exacerbated where firms that are the AM Law 100, all of a sudden, because of resources, have access so much that we're actually going to leave that 70% behind. So there's a push and pull on the availability of the technology and how it's used. Alan, and maybe just you in general, or as you see fit, to talk about how you're seeing it, both with your federal bar practice, where a super lawyer here gets on planes and goes tries federal cases in like Minnesota and shit,
Right.
or how do you see the impact of AI at the levels of what you have, maybe even at your own firm?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, with all the comments about Hogan levels and the size that we have and the resource that we have, I'm not sure if I've been complimented or maligned throughout the course of this conversation.
Both. It's nuanced. It's nuanced. Okay.
As I've mentioned to Alex before, I'm not the best guy to talk about these AI issues. I am an absolute Luddite, so I have a team. My younger teammates are all over that. But I think we're in the stage of, Roland was asking, are we at a point where we trust AI? I don't think so. I think we're at a point where we trust but verify, right? So anything you run through AI, the case law has to be checked, and I think that we're going to be in that position for quite some time. But I also, and I know it's a monumental shift with the, all the developments, and it's super fast. But this isn't the first time that lawyers in the Florida bar and lawyers across the nation have dealt with sort of seismic shifts in the way that we're able to operationalize. I'm imagining that when I was in law school, and I know maybe not Rick, maybe he's a little bit younger, but I know that when Roland and Alex and I were in law school, we learned how to shepherdize with the books. It was the books. It wasn't even, Westlaw, from what I remember, was online, meaning it was operational, but we were still going to the library for the most part. And I'm sure that lawyers had this same conversation when Westlaw and LexisNexis really took force. Like, how are we going to deal with this, new change in how we handle our work? And, another thing, I've had many conversations with folks about this, but is AI going to replace, young associates in some of the work they do? I'm sure that people had that same conversation. Is Westlaw going to replace, what associates are doing in terms of researching and whatnot? And, the legal, I'm not actually concerned about that. It's going to make things more efficient where they should. But the legal profession and legal work is kind of like water. You stop it somewhere. There's just going to be some other areas where if the associates aren't doing a lot of research, and if the associates aren't doing, 3 days of document review, because that's all being done by AI, what are they going to do? I'm sure that we'll find and collectively we will find other activities and other work. So anyways, I know we're going, those are my few comments on that.
No, but that, frankly, Alan, that's my take on it as well too. I think what'll happen is that they'll be doing other things, but the thought that you're not going to need associates because you have AI doing it, I don't, and like I said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's growing, and it is growing exponentially, but I just don't see it sort of replacing. And by the way, the judgment at some point has to be taken into consideration of how are they judging, making decisions on these things? Can you teach it that? I mean, I don't
I appreciate that. And thank you for the kind words. I don't think they're really warranted for me, but I appreciate you saying such nice things about appellate advocates.
Everybody here deflects, man, when there's compliments. Everybody here deflects. Roland's a beautiful human. Alan is a beautiful human, buddy. So are you. There's the compliment for all three of you.
Thank you.
But yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I can certainly see some values in AI that would make the appellate practice a lot more efficient. I wrote this sentence. I want this sentence to be more gooder. Can you make it more gooder? Here's a 15,000 page record. I don't want to spend 100 hours looking at this. Can you give me the Cliff's Notes version of it? And I think for, experienced practitioners who've been doing it for a while, I think it's a tool that's going to be very useful. I think for younger attorneys, I would encourage you to not use AI as much as you can, because I remember the first time I got a record on appeal that was like 10,000 pages because it followed a week-long trial and scorched earth litigation tactics. And I struggled with that thing. It was so friggin' hard. I wrapped my head around it. I didn't know how to get it all downloaded into my head. But struggle leads to success. The first time I did that, it was miserable. The second time I did it, it wasn't much better. But now I can, Alan knows this. We convinced about a case. It was a federal court appeal with a 15,000 page record. I got through that thing in like 7 days. And if I didn't go through those other experiences earlier, I wouldn't be able to. I have a concern that unless younger attorneys challenge themselves to take on those projects that seem insurmountable without the assistance of AI, I think there's a value in it. I think that it's really good for skill development.
Right. I think it's kind of like the young doctor that goes and, practice, does a residency at 120 hours a week, like you and I, when we were young lawyers, and you're billing and you're, in the office early, you're working late, you're making everything, and you're learning, you're lost and stuff. AI is going to get rid of a lot of that. And I think, to your point, Rick, at least, and I agree with Alan, a lot of it will just be, hey man, it's a shift and people have to figure it out. And there's a little bit of Darwinism, some sink or swim stuff that'll happen.
Yeah, no, but you make a good point, because you were lost, and then you had to find your way back home, right?
100%.
So you ended up figuring it out at some point, and so the skills that purportedly AI is going to replace. I mean, I don't know. It's a fascinating world, but I think Alan said it right. There's been several seismic shifts, in our profession. The services and ABO and all these other ones that are coming in, but I always believe work will go to good lawyers. That will always be the case in my humble opinion, what I've learned over the years. And so it's not just work will go to good lawyers with AI. It'll go to good lawyers, period. Right. Yep. And so, but it's a fascinating time, I think, frankly, and it's why among the reasons why it's super cool to be president of the Florida Bar, because I'm getting so much information on this stuff. We were at last year we went always do one out of state meeting, and it was in Austin, Texas, and the chief judge of the Texas Supreme Court came to speak to us. He had a really nice intro, and he thanked us for coming. And then he mentioned, and of course, the 900-pound gorilla in the room is AI, Yeah. And so there's no doubt of its impact in our profession.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So, man, on that note, I think the best way to end all of these is always to let our guest give his parting shot, man, because this was about you. And I want to tell you before you speak, and then we'll end after that. First of all, Rick, Alan, thanks, guys. Man, 2 days before Christmas. And I don't think you're here for me, okay? I think you're here because the Florida Bar president was coming. So I appreciate you saying yes for him. And then to my buddy Roland, man, before you give your parting shots, thank you. I think any lawyer who watches this needs to be very appreciative that there are people like you who take these positions that are so immensely important. And I wanted to give an opportunity of a snippet of time in your life, which I appreciate you giving us, to put out there the immense work that you do, how immensely important it is to have a Florida Bar president like you that has so much perspective and so much reality, so much honesty now around the mental health issues that even got my partner here and I to share some of our own personal struggles in that respect. And I think the way that you're trying to normalize that, the way you're encouraging activities, the way that you're being yourself and running around, you only got 6 or 7 months left. So I don't think you're going to pull a Trump and try to have an insurrection and stay another year. But
I can assure you that's not going to happen.
But I can tell you, I'd be the first one walking into the Capitol in support of that. So thank you, brothers, so much. And I'd love some parting words from you. And I want to wish all three of you a Merry Christmas.
Well, first of all, dude, I got to tell you that part of when I say it's cool to be a president of Florida Bar is to have opportunities like this, to be here with you and Alan and Rick and just talk shop and talk about the dilemmas we have in our profession. And it's a lot. I mean, there's just no other way around it. It's a lot. And so the opportunity to talk about it. And I will tell you, my number is 786-253-3027. That's my cell phone. And Roland at smgqlaw.com. I respond to every text, every email of somebody talking about things that we can improve my profession. And I mean, I was born in Cuba, dude. I mean, the thought of becoming Florida Bar president obviously is astounding to me, but I'm grateful for the opportunities. And it was done because of friendships like you and Alan. Nothing against you, Rick, but you're in a different circuit. But now I'm president of the entire bar, but without the 11th Circuit, without my friends' support here in Miami-Dade County, this would not have been possible. So I can't even begin to tell you what it really is an honor and a privilege.
Well, brother, I have you here in person. The humility that you have while you were just speaking is palpable. I can sense the energy and how humble you are about it. So thank you, man. It's an immense pleasure to have you. And by the way, these things could clearly go on for hours.
Yeah.
Like there's so much for us to talk about, but we're gonna cut it at this point. Thank you, my man, for coming in person. That's so cool.
Man,
So cool.
I'll come here anytime you need me.
Yeah, by the way, my associate producer said, he was like, he sent you this long email, right? Hey, blah, 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 blah. And you respond and you're like, you had me at Alex Almazan. So that's so great.
That worked. That worked.
All right, man. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Happy holidays, gentlemen.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thanks for watching the full Docket podcast. To stay up to date on upcoming podcasts and guests, like and follow us on social media for the latest updates. To keep this podcast part of a greater dynamic dialogue, we encourage your comments, and we'll see you next time on the full Docket.